Hi everyone, this is a getting started video for helping to get oriented and set up with your iPad. It's best to view this video after you have your iPad kit and you followed the printed instructions really that are just the basic level of turning the iPad on, getting it connected to Wi-Fi, and following some of the on-screen instructions when you first start your iPad up. But before you get into things like the Apple Teacher Center, where we're diving a little deeper into starting to how to use some of the software. So this is a basic orientation to really iPads in general, some of the default functionality and the way things work, especially with the touchscreen and some of the settings. So if you've never used an iPad before, this should be relatively new. If you have used an iPad or an iPhone and you're an Apple user, a lot of this stuff will be a reminder or something that you're already familiar with. But there's also certain things that we'll cover that you probably don't do as often on an iPhone or a smaller screen that may be really helpful and really useful on an iPad. So I would still recommend you go through and watch the whole video just to make sure you're comfortable with everything. Okay, so again, we're going to start with some of just the basic settings up front. One of the first things I want to talk about is Apple IDs. And so again, this does relate to if you are a previous Apple user or not. If you are an Android person or something else and you've never owned an Apple device, you will need to create an Apple ID. An Apple ID is your Apple account that will get you into your iPad and is connected with all the other services and cloud storage and things that you'll be using on the device. If you do own another Apple device, be it an iPhone or another iPad or something you've already owned Apple-wise, you likely already have an Apple ID. And the key here is that you really should only have one Apple ID with all of your devices. So you probably want to use the Apple ID you already have, even if that's an Apple ID that's really connected with a personal account rather than, like a Fisher work email. What we do recommend, if that's your situation, is that you go into your Apple ID and you add your Fisher email address, so at least that Fisher email address is associated. It does not have to be the primary. Your personal can still be the primary. So nothing really has to change. You're just adding the Fisher email address associated with that Apple ID so that, again, that it's just connected there. And if you don't have one, you're going to create one from scratch, and we'll give you the link to where that is. The next thing we're going to talk about is your settings app. I want to show you where the settings app is in general if you've never, again, used an Apple device. And then also we want to take a look at changing the name of your iPad. This is important for both instructors and students to do. And it comes into play when you start sharing your screen in the classroom and airdropping files back and forth. You want to know whose iPad it is that you're either looking at or sharing with, and this iPad name comes in handy here. So I'm actually going to go out altogether. Oops. I'm going to go back to my home screen where you can see all of the widgets here. And one of the first things I want to highlight is what is the settings app. So I'm just kind of circling it here. This little icon that looks like the gray little gear icon, this is the Apple settings app. And so we're going to go in here a bunch and take a look at a bunch of different settings, and it's an area you should be familiar with opening it up and navigating. So we're going to go into the settings app, and then your settings app here, you've got your Apple ID at the top. We're just going to scroll down on the left. What we're looking for specifically for this setting is under General, and then on the General page we're going to go to About. And right across the top here on the About page, you've got your iPad name, and you can customize this name. And this is what we recommend. First name, last name's iPad, so we know exactly whose iPad we're dealing with. And that's the setting you want to change there. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to my presentation and jump to the next one. So a couple other settings that we want to go back to. We want to take a look in that same settings app under General. We're going to take a look at background app refresh. So really on the same page we were just on for General, but now a little bit further down than About, we're going to go to background app refresh, and we're actually going to turn this off. What it means is that those apps are not going to be updating all of the time. They're only going to be updating when you use them. So this will actually save some battery and just not have things running that you don't necessarily need running all the time in the background. The next thing we want to take a look at is in the Control Center, and we want to customize this to make sure you've got the right features in your Control Center. So again, I'm going to go back to the settings app, and this time the setting is under general. Just below that, we're going to click on Control Center. And it opens up here with a list of things that are already included. So everything in red here is already included in your Control Center. And then everything down here in green is not. And you can click this little green plus if you want to add one of these in. So obviously this is something you can customize. If any of these things in green here would be things that would be very helpful to you, feel free to add them in. The Control Center is a quick way to access some of these features. The one that I really want you to pay attention to specifically is this, screen recording. This by default should actually be down here in the green list, and you want to click on that and move it up in your list somewhere. And I'm just going to show you quickly while we're here what the Control Center is. So this swipe from the upper right-hand corner of your screen. I'm going to do it again here. I'm swiping from the upper right-hand corner, if you can see what I'm indicating here, upper right-hand corner down. You can pull down your Control Center. And again, these are all of those apps that we just either turned on or off, and we can move them around in the list here. But this little red bullseye thing, this is actually indicating red right now because I'm using it. This is the tool I'm using to make this video. I'm doing a screen recording of my iPad, but we want you to have this in your Control Center so that you can do the same thing. This is the fastest and easiest way to make a short video from your iPad, and we'll talk more about how to do that in a second. But all of these features in your Control Center are controlled here as far as what you want in this list and what you don't want. Okay. Another thing I want to talk about now that we've gone into the Control Center is the Do Not Disturb function. This is actually really important and helpful during class time because when your iPad is set up and you've got your Apple ID, it can be connected with things like your messages or email or calendar, or all kinds of different apps. And all of those things can be dinging and going off and giving you notifications at any time. And obviously, when you're teaching and you're using your iPad, you don't want all that stuff to happen. You don't want the distraction of it, and you don't want necessarily anyone else to see what some of those things are alerting you to. So what you want to do is, again, this one I'm going to, go just back home. And I'm going to go back into my Control Center. So I'm just pulling down from that upper right-hand corner. And you can see this one in the Control Center. This is there by default, is Do Not Disturb, this little moon icon. And if I click and hold this little moon, it'll give you some options about how long you want Do Not Disturb on. For an hour, until later this evening, until you leave. So that's actually using your GPS location of where you are, or it can be connected with your calendar once you have your calendar set up. So you can turn it on and off, or you can choose how long you'd like it on for. Okay, so that's really, again, helpful during class time. And then the other thing I want to take a look at is widgets. So widgets are a little different than your Control Center. Widgets, if we go back to the home here, widgets are over here on the left. All of these little boxes over here are called widgets. And again, you can control which ones are here, which ones are not. This is a very much personal preference. You can play with this and really make it work for you. What I want to show you is how to edit these. And so if you just scroll down in this list, you're going to get a little edit button. You can use the minus sign. You can remove any of them that are here, but you can also go up to this plus and you can add more. Okay, so there's a whole bunch here that you might want to add based on the apps that you have on your iPad. You can also choose at the top here whether you want this widgets area to be on or off by default. If I leave it on, it is permanently visible on this left-hand side of my first home screen. If I turn it off, and then I just click on the background here, I can actually set it so that I don't need to see it, but then I need to swipe to the right to pull that back. It's just a matter of, again, personal preference, whatever you prefer. I'm just going to go back in to edit. And I personally like to keep it on so that I do see it all the time. Another recommendation I have here is to make sure that you have this batteries widget on. You can see it'll tell you the battery of your iPad, but in addition to that, it'll also tell you the battery of your Apple Pencil, which is the most helpful. The battery of your iPad is always going to be up here in the upper right-hand corner, so you don't necessarily need that part. But the battery life of your Apple Pencil will be something that's very easy to miss and forget. And again, if you're going to class and you need to know that your Apple Pencil is ready and charged to be used, you want to make sure that that's something you can easily find. Okay, so changing those is really helpful. So next we want to talk a little bit about gestures. So this really has to do with the finger movements you're going to use on the screen to make certain things happen. Again, some of these may be familiar to you if you've done some of this on an iPhone, but many of them are not, especially if you're not typically using an iPad, you don't have that bigger screen size where some of these come into play. So one of the first ones I want to show you is how to access your dock. Your dock is if I go back to the home page, across the bottom here, this is your dock, right? With this little menu of all the apps, your most recently used and your most frequently used apps. The key is that you don't always have to go back to your home screen to access this, and there's actually certain things you want to do when you don't want to be on your home screen. So I'm going to go back into my Keynote presentation, and I'm going to show you how to access the dock from within an app. So what we're doing is we're swiping up from the bottom very slowly and then letting go. So that while Keynote's still open, I can actually pull up this dock, and then I could use this to either navigate to another app quickly, or this is where I get into some other features we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, but that's how to access your dock from within an app. Then we're going to talk about notifications. This is a swipe down from the top of your screen. So again, you can always get this by just swiping down. Those are notifications from all the different apps you have on your iPad. The widgets we already talked about. So if you don't have these widgets on the left here by default, then you'd be swiping to the right to get that to pop up. The control center we also talked about. So this is the swipe from the upper right-hand corner to pull the control center down. Your recent apps. This is a little different. From here, you're going to swipe to the center from the bottom and hold for a second. So it's a little bit like pulling your dock up, but you're going to go a little further and you're going to hold. So I'm going to go up from the bottom and then I'm going to pull to the center and hold and let go. And this now shows your recent apps. So this is taking a look at all of the recent apps that you have open. You could flick these up to the top and you could quit them. You could also use this to just navigate to a different app that maybe you're not looking at right now. Okay. And then search, this is another one that's really important. If you don't use search a lot now, it's something you want to think about, because as you start to use your iPad more and more, there's more and more stuff on it. There's more and more iPads, features, settings, things you're looking for. And often, rather than knowing exactly where to go to find it, it's easier to search. So just swipe, and this one is from your home screen. So swipe from the middle and the search will just appear. And again, this is a search to look for anything, files, apps, settings, whatever it is you might be looking for. You can also obviously use the Siri dictation if you'd like to click the little microphone and you can say what you're searching for instead of typing it in. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is cursors, movement, and dealing with text, especially through a touch screen. So I can show you some of these as well. So if you tap between a word, if you double tap, you can get the double tap a word, you can select the word. If you tap once between, it should appear, there we go, between two words. And if you double tap with two fingers, you can get the sentence. And then also you see on an iPad, again, you might be familiar with this with iPhones, but you get the blue kind of drag bars here on each side so that you can select more or less from whatever's highlighted. You can also click and hold to get magnification. So if you want to zoom in and move your cursor around or move a word, you can do that. And then when you tap and hold, you get a pop-up menu. See the black at the top here for cut, copy, delete? That's an additional menu that pops up based on the selection that you've just tapped on. So those are some tips about dealing with text, especially without a mouse, which is a little different, and doing that, through finger gestures instead. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is a basic orientation just to the icons, folders, and docks. We've talked about the dock a little bit. I showed you where that was. We want to talk about the way you can also manage apps. So I'm going to go back to my home screen here. So remember, this is my very first home screen. This is where the widgets will appear. When you're on your home screen, you always see your dock at the bottom, across the bottom here. But you can have multiple screens of apps. You can see I'm just going kind of right to left. I can go back and forth. So you can control what apps show on what screen. You might want to organize them a certain way. You can click and hold an app and edit home screen. You'll get them kind of into this little dancing mode, and then you can move them around either on one screen, or if you go way over to the side, You can move them all together to another screen, okay, and drop them wherever you want. You can also drop an app on top of another app, and that will put it in a folder if you would choose to do that. And then when you're done, just click on the home button or click on the background. You can also drag and drop apps down into your dock. You can move some that are in your dock out if you'd like them just on the screen instead of in the dock. Now you see my dock here, so this left-hand side of the dock, you can have up to 15 things in the list over here. And then you see this little line dividing, there's 3 to the right. Those 3 are the most recently used apps. Those 3 you can't control, that's just automatic based on what the apps are you're using. But the left side, you can have up to 15. And you can see for an example here, you can actually have folders in your dock. So this is a way to get even more. So I've got a folder here just called Google with a whole bunch of Google apps, but instead of having each one of those individually in my dock, I can put them all in a folder and save a little space. Okay, so this is just kind of basic layout orientation of how you might want to set up your iPad so you can find what you're looking for. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is files. And again, you may or may not have used this if you've used an iPad. You may use it on your iPhone, but probably not as likely. This is something that becomes more handy and more useful once you're using an iPad with a bigger screen, is your Files app. So again, I'm just going to go back to my home screen. And usually down in your dock by default, as long as you haven't moved it, you're going to have a little icon like this, little folder icon. This is your Files app, okay? So your Files app has files that you've stored on your iPad. So you can see on the link on the left here, location of these files on my iPad, as well as other locations that you've added. So if you go up to this little circle ... and you go to Edit Sidebar, you can actually control some other features that you want to turn on in your Files app if you have these apps already installed. For example, we recommend turning on Google Drive, but you have to have the Google Drive app already installed and set up on your iPad before it'll appear here in your Files app. That app should be pushed to your iPad by default, but if it's not, we can help you get that. You would log into it with your Fisher Google account, your just normal Fisher account, and then you would be able to access things on Google Drive. I'm just going to hit done here. On your Fisher Google Drive account, just the way you would with other resources through your Files app. Okay, and then same thing with your iCloud Drive. Once you have an Apple ID, you will automatically get an iCloud Drive account. That iCloud Drive has 5 gigs of storage on it, so it's not unlimited, and it is associated with your personal Apple ID. So it's up to you kind of what you want to store there and what you want to store in other locations. Our best recommendation is to store as much as possible on Google Drive because it is associated with your Fisher account and it has unlimited storage. Storing on your iPad is fine, but remember that that information is then not backed up. So if you were to lose or break the iPad in some way, those files might be lost. And again, you only have a certain amount of storage on your iPad, so it's something you also want to think about storage space-wise, if that's the best place to store it. Okay, so a fun one I want to show you is multitasking. Again, I find this is one that most people don't use frequently, even if they, have an iPhone and use it all the time. It's something that comes in handy once you have the bigger screen. So we just definitely want to make sure you're fluent and comfortable with this. The first type of multitasking is called slide over. So what this means is you have one app open across your entire screen in the background, and then a second app that's open over the top, kind of floating there. So I'm going to just open up Notability here. I'm going to pull it from my dock. I'm going to drag it over. That wasn't right. I'm going to open my dock from the bottom. I'm going to get Notability and just let it sit over the top here for a second. Let's see here. And so Notability is now just an app over the top when I'm looking at my Keynote slide behind that. And then I'm going to just drag to the right and get rid of that. So that is called slide over. So I can just kind of see a little bit of an app on top of whatever other app I was working on. Now the next one is actually called split view. So same thing, I'm going to pull my dock up from the bottom, and then I'm just going to drag all the way over to the right until you get that kind of black background. Let go, and now I've got Keynote on half the screen, Notability on the other half, and then I can move these things back and forth and choose which I want to be bigger or smaller on the screen. Okay, so that's called split view, and then when I'm done, I'm just going to swipe that over to the right. So those are probably the two most common. Now the other one is called split view, but specifically in Safari. So this is only done through the Safari browser. So what I'm going to do here is just go back. I'm going to open up one browser, and then I'm going to open up another browser. So I've got two windows open now in Safari. Now these are just tabs. This is not split view, but if I take one of these and I do the same thing and I kind of drag it over to the side, I can actually set these two up as split view in Safari. So now I've got, instead of two tabs that I can really only look at one at a time, I've got them next to each other, and same thing, I can kind of control how much of the screen I want to dedicate to one to the other. Now again, that's something very specific to Safari. And can't be done in just any browser. A lot of the split view features that we're showing right now are things that can be done with Apple products, Apple apps, or apps that have been specifically updated to be compatible with this functionality, which not all of them are. So again, if you're using something that's not Apple native, this may or may not work exactly this way. Okay? But that is multitasking with either slide over or split view. And again, this is one, it is hard to show this in a video. You can't see exactly the movements that I'm doing, but this is one that's really common to want to practice when you do have some face-to-face time, so that we can really kind of get a handle on how these works. It takes a little bit of practice and finesse, but once you get it, it's really helpful. Okay. The next one we want to talk about a little bit is the difference between Airdrop and AirPlay. These are two things that we find very commonly used in the classroom between instructors and students, but we want to make sure everybody's comfortable with the difference between them. So Airdrop is the ability to share files directly from one device to another Apple product, whether it be a phone, an iPad, a Mac, whatever it might be, within Bluetooth range. And so this is different than sending a text message or an email or something like that, where you're really going over a network to do that type of sharing. This is something that's going over Bluetooth, and therefore when you do AirDrop, it can only be done with people who are in close proximity to you, about 30 feet or so. But what's nice is that obviously when we're in a classroom and we are all together, that's something that we can do very easily to either send files out to students, maybe students submit the files to you. It's a lot like handing papers back and forth. We're just doing that electronically. So that's what AirDrop can be used for. And you can see this when you get to the sharing option in a lot of different apps. You'll be able to see what that looks like. Let me just go to my Notability note here. And if I go to share, I might have to open one specific one up. And if I go to other apps, then you're going to get this AirDrop option, and it'll show other devices that are in close proximity to you that you would be able to AirDrop these files to. One important thing about AirDrop is that you do want to check your settings of both your iPad and the iPad you're trying to share with. So I'm going back to the settings where we started in the beginning under General, and then on the General page there's an option for AirDrop. You do want to make sure that this is set to everyone so that you can receive things that people are airdropping to you, and that you want to make sure whoever you're sending it to has it set on everyone as well. Now, I want to make sure that we remind everyone that this is something you want to be careful of. When you set it to everyone, it means anyone can send files to you. So if you're in a public location and you're doing work at Starbucks and somebody airdrops a file to you, obviously you want to be careful. You don't necessarily know who that person is or why they're sending you a file. So, you want to be cautious when you have it open this publicly. But when you're not in those types of situations, and again, you're on campus and you're in a classroom, it's less likely that that type of issue would occur, and it is something we use frequently within the classroom. So you just want to be cautious and aware of your surroundings when you have this set to everyone. Okay, so that's AirDrop. And then AirPlay. So AirPlay is very different. AirPlay is actually what we use with the iPads and the Apple TV in our classrooms to display what we have on our iPads on the projector screen in the front of the room. So every classroom on campus is set up with an Apple TV, and the AirPlay option is what lets us do that type of projection. So it's really mirroring what's going on your iPad onto that projector screen via the Apple TV. So to get this setting turned on and to do this in a classroom, you're going to go back into your, you're going to go into your control center, and you see you've got this option here for screen mirroring. Screen mirroring is what we use when we do AirPlay, and we would choose an Apple TV. So if I choose screen mirroring here, it's going to pick up, whatever Apple TVs are in close range of where you are located at that time. So in a classroom, it should give options of based on the class room and number that you're in. So it might, say Basil 207 or Carney whatever number, and you'll see those Apple TV show up, and that's you're picking which Apple TV you want to broadcast your iPad to based on your classroom. Okay, so that is the difference between AirPlay and AirDrop. Last but not least, we want to talk a little bit about the Apple Pencil. So remember, your Apple Pencil does need to be paired with your iPad. To do that, you're going to take the cap off the end of the iPad. You're going to take the charger portion here where you would charge your Apple Pencil. You're going to plug that in. Not only does it charge, but it also pairs if the Apple Pencil needs to be paired. And that's how you associate the pencil with your iPad. In addition, you will find in your Apple Pencil box, there's this little adapter, and this can be used to actually charge your iPad with the wall charger instead of having to charge it directly on the side of the iPad. So that can be helpful. Obviously, you can imagine if your iPad were to fall when your Apple Pencil is charged and plugged in on the side like that, obviously something would get broken, whether it was the iPad or the pencil. So whenever you charge that way, you want to be very, very careful with it, and it's much safer and much faster to charge it from the wall charger if possible. Another thing that's come up is that obviously all the Apple Pencils look exactly the same, and so if you're concerned about losing your Apple Pencil or not knowing which one's yours, you can get these little Apple Pencil wraps or skins that you can put on it so it looks different. We've also seen some that are like little rubber holder so that your cap doesn't get lost, and it actually attaches your cap with this little rubber just link so that if you do take that cap off, it doesn't get lost somewhere, because obviously those get lost all the time. So that's just something to think about, and again, a personal preference. Okay. Last but not least, I do want to go over just some of the basic apps that you will find on your iPad. Remember, all of the IFisher iPads are managed by OIT, and so you will have an app on your iPad called SelfService. SelfService is the app that is used by OIT to manage the iPad and to push apps directly out to your iPad so that we can automate some of the things that we know you're going to need. So I'm just going to show you quickly the SelfService app. Gotta find it here. It's under my folder. So it looks like this. It's kind of this little rainbow colored Jamp SelfService. I gotta fix mine. Oops. So that's what it looked like. Mine needs a little bit of repair to it, obviously. But when you go into SelfService, you're going to see a bunch of apps in the list here. And these are all of the apps that we'll make available for you. If they're not already on your iPad, you can choose to install them from there. And you can also check back to the SelfService app if there's any updates to those apps that you need to go back to. And obviously your iPad is also going to come with all the Apple productivity tools. I just want to explain and make sure everyone understands what these are. So Pages will look like an icon like this, the orange with the pencil. The Pages app is basically Apple's version of Microsoft Word, so a Word document processing kind of app. The next one here in green is called Numbers, and this is Apple's competitor product to Microsoft Excel. And then the last one here, this is actually the app I'm using right now. This is called Keynote, and this is the competitor app kind of to PowerPoint. So Pages, Numbers, Keynote are the Apple productivity tools that will also be available on your iPad by default and on the apps that we're going to be exploring more in the Fisher Apple Academy through the Apple Teacher Learning Center. One of the last things I want to show you is exactly what it is I'm doing right now by making this video. So I mentioned this up front, and we've talked about it. We've looked at it in the control center. But what I'm doing right now is actually using my iPad to make this video. And I'm capturing a screen recording of my iPad as well as the audio from the mic to make this video recording right now. So again, I really just did this from the control center. I've got my screen recording tool. It's been running the whole time, and it's just capturing whatever I'm showing as well as whatever I'm saying, and it's making the video. And it's going to save this actually to my photo roll. So in my Photos app, I'll actually find when I'm done this video file. And the key here is that you do not want to upload these video files directly to Blackboard. They are video files. They can be pretty big. So what you want to do is most likely upload these either to Ensemble if you're an Ensemble user, or I've had a lot of faculty who publish them directly to YouTube. If you have a YouTube account or you would choose to create a YouTube account, you can publish these videos even as unlisted, and then you can post those links in a Blackboard course or another place you might want to send that for students to access. So a lot of folks have started to use the iPad to make these types of videos, especially for short mini lectures, going over assignments, especially with your Apple Pencil if you need to draw or do an equation or some type of diagram. They can be really, really helpful. So that's the basics of how to make those videos. And that's all I have for today. Really, we went over a lot. This is why we wanted to make it into a video. So hopefully when you view this video, you can start and stop and pause and go back and watch whatever you need to as many times as you need to get your settings correct and make sure you're comfortable with some of these tools. But obviously remember, practice makes perfect, and we'll have a lot of time to practice these together in person. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to go over any of these again when we have time together in person. Okay, good luck.